Hello, everyone, and welcome to our channel where we bring you emotional and thought-provoking stories. Today, we share the story of Ethan, a devoted single father who has endured unimaginable hardships while raising his twin daughters. My name is Ethan. My wife passed away while giving birth to our two daughters, leaving behind a void that I have never been able to fill. Since that day, I have played the role of both father and mother to Olivia and Elisa. They are so alike that I sometimes have trouble telling them apart. Olivia, the older twin, is calm and thoughtful, while Elisa is energetic, always full of life and laughter. Life has not been easy, but watching my girls grow has given me a reason to keep pushing forward. I have done my best to give them a fulfilling childhood despite the absence of their mother's emotional support. Over the years, I had only one wish: to see them grow into good and happy women. Now, at 22 years old, Olivia and Elisa have become intelligent, accomplished young women. I was proud of them, but I never expected that one day they would repay me in a way that was beyond my imagination. It was an unusual evening. Instead of returning home at my usual late hour, work had ended early for once. Relieved, I eagerly made my way home, looking forward to an evening of rare relaxation. However, as I reached the house, I noticed that the front door was slightly ajar, something that never happened. A strange feeling crept into my chest. I hesitated for a moment before gently pushing the door open. As soon as I stepped inside, laughter echoed from the living room. It wasn't the familiar sound of my daughters watching a movie or chatting with friends. There was an unfamiliar voice, a man's voice. I froze in place, straining to listen. A mix of Olivia's chuckles and Elisa's excited giggles filled the air, making my heart pound harder. Unease gripped me as I walked cautiously toward the living room, my steps feeling heavier with each passing second. When I reached the doorway, the sight before me sent a jolt of shock through my body. Olivia, the daughter I had loved and raised, was there with Elisa and an unknown young man, all three completely unclothed, seemingly lost in their own world, oblivious to their surroundings. My mind went blank, my emotions freezing in place before a surge of uncontrollable anger erupted within me. "What is this?" I roared, my voice shattering the atmosphere of the room. The three of them jolted out of their trance. The young man scrambled to gather his clothes, his hands trembling as he tried to dress under my burning gaze. Olivia stood motionless, her face pale, her wide eyes filled with panic. Her lips moved as though she wanted to speak, but no words came out. Elisa, usually so full of confidence, stood frozen, her body shaking as she tried to shield herself with a nearby blanket. "Dad, Dad," Olivia finally managed to whisper, her voice barely audible. "What are you doing?" I thundered, my grip tightening on the armrest of the chair beside me, trying to anchor myself amidst the storm of emotions surging through me. Olivia rushed forward, her hands outstretched, desperation in her eyes. "Dad, please let me explain." But I didn't want to listen. How could I? How could I process such a betrayal, such a disgraceful act? Every principle I had worked so hard to instill in them, every value I had tried to uphold, seemed to crumble in that single moment. My chest ached, my breath came in ragged gasps, and my vision blurred as my world unraveled before me. "Explain," I spat, my voice shaking. "Explain what, Olivia? That I raised you for this? That after all these years of sacrifice, This is how you choose to live? Lisa finally found her voice, stepping forward. Dad, it's not what you think. Please, just hear us out. But I couldn't. I couldn't hear anything past the ringing in my ears. I had dreamed of their future, envisioned the women they would become, the lives they would build, and now that vision had been shattered in an instant. Disappointment, anguish, betrayal. These emotions clawed at my heart as I turned away, unable to bear the sight of them any longer. I needed space. I needed air. Without another word, I stormed out of the house, my mind racing, my heart breaking. As I walked through the cold night, I questioned everything. Had I failed them? Had I missed the signs? Was this my fault? But above all, one thought consumed me. Could I ever look at my daughters the same way again? My eyes locked onto the young man. "Get out of here now," I shouted, my voice cutting through the suffocating air. He hesitated for a second before scrambling to gather his clothes, bowing his head and mumbling a string of apologies. As he inched toward the door, an overwhelming rage surged through me. I wanted to grab him by the collar, to make him understand the weight of his actions. But before I could move, Olivia stepped in front of me. "Dad, please let him go. It's my fault. Don't make this worse," she pleaded, her voice thick with tears. Elisa was at my side in an instant, clutching my arm tightly. "Dad, we were wrong, but please, don't do this." I stopped in my tracks, my chest heaving with the force of my ragged breaths. My eyes flickered back to the young man, who was now inching toward the exit, his entire body trembling. He stole one last glance at me before bolting through the door, which clicked shut behind him, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. I turned back to my daughters, my fury still simmering beneath the surface, but when I saw Olivia's red, tear-filled eyes, something inside me shifted. How could I bring myself to strike them, to scold them in this moment when they already looked so afraid? They clung to me, their bodies trembling, their faces pale with guilt and fear. Unable to process my emotions any further, I tore myself away from them and stormed upstairs. The door slammed behind me with a hollow thud, the sound echoing through the now silent house. Leaning against the door, I stood there, drained of all energy, yet my mind refused to settle. My breaths came fast and shallow, as if I were caught in a storm I had no power to stop. They were my daughters, the two lives I had cherished since the moment they were placed in my arms. I had promised myself to protect them, to raise them with love and guidance, but now that promise felt shattered. What I had just witnessed was like a cruel slap to my very soul. They were no longer the innocent children I had once known, and I, their father, had lost the control I had always believed I held. Where had I gone wrong? When had the gap between us grown so vast that I failed to notice? Olivia's tearful, trembling plea for forgiveness played on repeat in my mind, twisting the knife of regret even deeper. I never imagined I would be faced with such a moment, with such a painful realization. The anger still burned within me, but it was no longer solely directed at them. No, I was furious with myself. How had I allowed this to happen? Why hadn't I seen the signs? Questions tormented me, spiraling endlessly. Why had they chosen to do this here, in our home, in the very heart of our family memories? Had they not considered how I would feel? I had given everything for them, dedicated my life to raising them with love, discipline, and strong values, and yet they had betrayed that trust in the most unimaginable way. I wanted to understand, but the more I thought about it, the more tangled my thoughts became. My hands found their way to my face, pressing against my temples. My chest ached, my head throbbed, and my heart felt impossibly heavy. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Would my pain change anything? Would my anger set things right? As a father, I had always believed I had to be strong, but in this moment, I felt anything but. I felt lost. What would I say when I saw them again? How would I handle this? I had every right to scold them, to punish them, but would that help, or would it only drive them further away? The weight of uncertainty pressed down on me like an unbearable burden. A single thought surfaced. I needed time. Time not just to calm down, but to understand. Right now, I couldn't face them, not with my emotions still raw and volatile. Standing up, I moved to my closet and pulled out a fresh shirt, my skin clammy with sweat, though my body felt ice cold. I needed to leave. I needed to breathe, to escape this suffocating house filled with memories and shattered expectations. With slow, heavy steps, I made my way downstairs. Every movement felt labored, as if I carried an invisible weight. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, the muffled sound of sobs reached my ears. Olivia and Elisa were still crying. Their pain seeped into the walls, into the very air, making it impossible to ignore. I paused, my heart clenching painfully, and just like that, the last of my anger dissipated, replaced by something even heavier, an indescribable sorrow. My daughters, my little girls, were hurting. No matter how betrayed I felt, no matter how much I struggled to comprehend what had happened, I couldn't ignore that they were in pain too. I lingered there for a moment, torn between my need to leave and my responsibility as their father, but I knew if I stayed, I would only let my emotions get the best of me. I needed clarity before I could even attempt to make sense of this situation. With a deep, unsteady breath, I turned away from the sound of their cries and stepped out into the night, hoping that somewhere in the quiet darkness, I would find the answers I so desperately needed. Even though I was angry, I knew I was the only one who could help them navigate this confusion. But not now. I needed time. I needed space to calm down so that I wouldn't have to face them while my anger was still raw. As I headed toward the living room, I was surprised to see that my daughters had changed into thin pajamas, their uneasiness apparent, but I was in no state to pay attention to that. My mind was chaotic, unable to focus on small details. Olivia saw me enter and immediately ran over, grabbing my hand and gently pulling me closer. "Dad, come here. We have something to tell you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. I tried to pull my hand away, but the look in her eyes, fearful and filled with tears, made it impossible. They were my daughters. How could I harden my heart against that expression? After a brief struggle with my emotions, I followed Olivia and sat down on a nearby chair. I said nothing, waiting to see how they would explain. Silence stretched between us as I braced myself. Olivia sat beside me, her eyes fixed on mine as if afraid I might stand up and leave. Her sister sat across from us, her face full of worry, but she didn't dare look at me. A heavy silence filled the room, broken only by our soft breathing. Finally, Olivia spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Dad, I'm sorry. I know I was wrong. I can't justify it, but I never thought things would go this far. I didn't think you'd come back so soon." Her sister, her voice choked with regret, added, "I'm sorry too, Dad. We didn't mean for this to happen. We didn't know what to do." Olivia tightened her grip on my hand, her eyes brimming with tears. "I'm so sorry, Dad. I don't know what to say to make you forgive me." I looked at them, my heart heavy with sorrow. Their apologies couldn't erase my anger, but I could see the sincerity in their eyes. Yet, regret alone wouldn't be enough to fix this. I remained silent, torn between my lingering disappointment and the love I had always felt for them. Olivia's teary eyes stayed fixed on me, full of fear and remorse. Her sister was no better. She kept her gaze on the floor, unwilling to meet my eyes. Their regret was clear, but so was the pain in my heart. The room was thick with tension, the air heavy with emotions we couldn't voice. My body trembled slightly, overwhelmed by the turmoil within me. Finally, I sighed and spoke softly. "I know you're angry. I know you're disappointed. But what's done is done. No one can change the past." Olivia clung to my hand, her voice pleading. "Dad, I really don't know what to do. I regret it so much." Her sister bowed her head, her voice barely audible. We just wanted to try, but we didn't think things would go this far." Their words pierced me like a blade, but I knew that scolding or punishing them right now wouldn't help. Sometimes time was needed, not just for them to understand their mistakes, but for me to process my own emotions as well. I gazed at my daughters, the two people I loved more than anything in the world, and something unexpected stirred within me. A warmth, small but unmistakable, rose in my chest. My anger couldn't last forever. No matter what had happened, I was their father, and as their father, I couldn't let my emotions destroy the bond we had built over the years. Without another word, I pulled them into my arms, hugging them tightly. The air around us was still thick with tension, but for a brief moment, there was peace. I didn't speak. I just held them, allowing the silence to wrap around us like a fragile truce. After what felt like an eternity, I finally found my voice. It was low and gentle. "I don't know how to change what's already happened, but I will not abandon you. We will get through this together." Olivia nodded slightly, her body still trembling. Her sister, without hesitation, clung to me just as tightly. For now, that was enough. Even if the road ahead was uncertain, even if the pain still lingered, we would face it together. Finally, I spoke, my voice low and steady. "I don't know how to stop this from happening again, but I will not abandon you. We will get through this together, okay?" Olivia nodded slightly, and her sister quickly followed suit. A quiet sense of comfort settled in the air. The three of us, though burdened by heavy emotions, had at least found a place to start again. My feelings were difficult to describe, torn between disappointment and deep love for my daughters. though the sting of betrayal still lingered in my heart. Holding them close seemed to quiet my turmoil, making way for something else. A painful yet compassionate understanding. I knew I couldn't stay angry with them forever. After all, they were still my children. As I let them go, Olivia and her sister remained seated, their eyes red, their faces filled with anxiety. They didn't dare look at me, as if waiting for some final decision. Her sister bit her lip, then lifted her gaze, her voice trembling. "Dad, I know I did wrong. I can't forgive myself, but I promise I'll never do it again. Can you believe me?" I looked at them, exhaustion and sadness evident in my eyes. Everything around me blurred, leaving only the three of us in this moment. It became clear that I couldn't dwell in the past forever, nor could I let my anger control me. Mistakes happen, but what truly matters is how we choose to fix them and move forward. Pulling them close again, this time, it wasn't just a hug. It was a strong embrace, free of anger and resentment. "I won't leave you," I said, my voice breaking slightly. "I don't know how to make things go back to how they were, but I know one thing. If we work together, we can get through this." Olivia and her sister nodded, tears shimmering in their eyes, but now there was hope as well. The three of us remained there in silence, simply existing together. A strange peace filled the air. Everything had changed, but somehow it felt as if we could still begin again. Then I stood up and walked toward the window. Outside, the sun was beginning to set, casting a warm glow as it faded into the quiet night. Though my heart still held unresolved emotions, I realized that today I had moved past my anger. Perhaps that was the most important thing. I couldn't change the past, but I could decide how to live with the future. Turning back to my daughters, I spoke softly. "I love you." This time there was no pain in my words, only love, strong and unwavering, a father's love for his children. The moment of silence that followed felt significant, as if something deep and unspoken had finally been understood. Gradually, the atmosphere in the room shifted, not fully healed, but lighter than before. I didn't know when the sharp pain in my chest had lessened, but for now, it no longer consumed me every time I looked at them. We sat together for a while, saying nothing, yet there was a newfound connection between us. Not one built on apologies or promises, but through understanding, forgiveness, and the realization that we still needed one another. Eventually, I stood up and retreated to my room. The weight in my heart wasn't as heavy, but there were still lingering questions, uncertainties about the future. No matter what, we had weathered a storm, and I knew we would continue moving forward. Despite everything, we were still a family. The next day, everything seemed to return to normal. The house still carried warmth, laughter echoed during breakfast, and life carried on. But something within me had changed. I had learned something invaluable, that nothing is more important in a family than understanding and patience. Mistakes happen, not to break relationships, but to test the strength of our love and tolerance. As parents and children, we all falter. But what truly matters is our ability to learn and grow from those mistakes. Forgiveness is never easy, but it is necessary to keep a family strong. Anger should never blind us to the opportunity to help and love each other. We must always be willing to listen and share, not letting resentment cloud our hearts, especially with the ones we hold dearest. Sometimes a simple hug or a few loving words can heal wounds deeper than we realize. Family love is the most precious thing we have, and no matter the challenges, we must never give up on it. Some moments divide your life into before and after. That afternoon, so ordinary at first, turned into one of those moments for me. Everything was as it should be. I was home alone and Mark was away on another work trip. The only upside to his absence was the chance to carve out a little space for myself. For too long, I had ignored my own needs and desires. The past few years of Mark's growing distance had left me at a point where every moment of solitude felt like a luxury, and today was one of those rare luxuries. In my room, wrapped in my favorite soft blankets, I had set up my laptop and placed a few of my little indulgences nearby. I used to have these quiet moments often, back when Lucas wasn't home. But now that he had returned from college, finding opportunities like this had become nearly impossible. Lucas, Mark's son from his first marriage, even thinking about his name stirred something in me, something I couldn't deny. The first time I met him, his tall frame, sharp features, and deep-set eyes had surprised me. But it was just a passing thought. Yes, just a thought. I knew Lucas was out with his friends and wouldn't be back until late in the evening. That's why I felt free to retreat to my room and indulge in a little time for myself. I thought I had closed the door properly, but I hadn't realized it hadn't fully latched. And then everything spiraled out of control. Just as I was starting to relax, Lucas walked in. The few seconds when our eyes met felt like an eternity. I scrambled to cover myself to hide the items in my hands, but it was no use. The sounds from my laptop reached his ears, and his eyes widened even more. My body froze. I couldn't cover myself, couldn't turn off the sound, couldn't escape the humiliating situation. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it might burst from my chest. The expression on Lucas's face was something I would never forget. Shock, curiosity, and something else. A pull, an unspoken recognition, maybe even desire. In that moment, the emotions swelling inside me weren't just shame. That look, his look, made me realize the emptiness I had been carrying. I guess I should have knocked, Lucas said, his voice slightly unsteady but deep. He slowly backed away, his eyes never leaving me as the door clicked shut. I collapsed onto the bed, burying my face in my hands. What had I done? I was a 40-year-old woman, and Mark's son, my stepson, had just seen me like that. My mind replayed the look in his eyes over and over, and with each replay, a strange warmth spread through me. But at the same time, I was drowning in a deep well of shame. That look, it wasn't just shock. There was something else in it, like he understood me, like he wanted more. Even thinking about it felt wrong, disgusting, wasn't it? But I couldn't stop myself. My heart was still pounding, and the strange feeling rising inside me wasn't just shame. I had noticed Lucas's attention before, the way his eyes lingered on me, the quiet way he seemed drawn to me. I had always tried to brush it off, pretending it wasn't there, until today. This encounter had changed everything. 3 days, Mark would be away for 3 more days, and for 3 days it would just be me and Lucas in this house. I had no idea how I was going to face Lucas again, yet deep down, alongside the fear of what this could mean, there was an undeniable thrill, forbidden, dangerous, and impossible to ignore. I thought it would end there, that it would remain an accident, but I had no idea what was coming next.